Shalom Aleichem, Mishnah Yomi continues for Shmini Chag Atzeret. It's already Simchat Torah in Eretz Yisrael. Thank God, every day we have the Simcha of Torah here in Mishnah Yomi land. We're in chapter 8 of Bava Metzia, Mishnah Gimel Dalet today. Hashoel et apara. Somebody is borrowing a cow. Or could be borrowing anything. V'shilcha, and the lender sends the item to the borrower, biad beno, under the care of the borrower's son, biad avdo, or with his eved ivri. Eved ivri has more independence than an eved kanani, or biad shlucho, or with his agents, o biad beno, biad avdo, biad shlucho shel shoel, or it's with the son, or the messenger, or the eved of the lender. So what's going on is the lender is the one choosing the means of conveying this item or this animal to the borrower. It hasn't yet got to the borrower, and the lender's the one choosing how to get it there. Umeta, and it dies on the way to the borrower before the cow ever gets to the borrower. Pater, the borrower is exempt. He is not considered to have begun his period of borrowing yet. Now the Mishnah contrasts this to the following case. Amar lo hashoel. The borrower's telling the lender, Sholchali biad bani. You can send me the cow with my son. Biad avdi, with my eved kanani. Eved ivri. Biad shluchi, with my messenger, my business partner, whatever it is. Or biad bincha, or you could send it with your son. Have your son bring the cow. Or biad avdecha, or your servant. Biad shluchacha, or your agent. Osha marlo amashil. Or if the lender tells the borrower, he says, listen, I hear you want to borrow a cow. He says, Haredi misholcha lecha biad b'ni. I'll send it with my son over to your place. Biad avdi, with my servant. Biad shluchi, with my agent. O biad bincha, or I'll send it with your son. Biad avdecha, biad shluchacha. Amr lo eshoel shlach. And the borrower says, yeah, go ahead and send it. V'shilcha v'meta chayev. And it dies on the way there. Then the borrower is chayev. In these cases, the borrower is choosing the transportation, or at least agreeing to the lender's a choice of transportation. So it's already considered as if he's borrowed it, even though the cow lemaisa never got to his field. V'chen b'sha shemachazira. And so too, at the time he's returning the cow. If the borrower just sends his son back to the lender with the cow, the borrower is still considered a borrower until the son actually delivers the cow back. But if the lender sends his own son or his own agent to come pick up the cow, then at that point, the lender is already on the hook. He's considered as if he has the cow back, and the borrower is no longer responsible. Now on to Mishnah Daled, Hamachalif para bechamor. Somebody's trading a cow for a donkey. And, the animals are over there in their respective barns, and the guys are in the shuk, in the bank, in the marketplace doing business, and then they go to pick up their animal, v'yalda, and they see that the cow has just mazel tov, had a calf. V'chen mocher shivchato, somebody is selling a servant who's a Canaanite woman, and by the time the deal's done, they come back, v'yalda, and mazel tov, she had a son. So zeomer ad shalom macharti, the seller's saying, this took place before the sale. And therefore the seller is claiming, I only sold you the mother, I did not sell you the child. She had the child before the transaction took place. V'zeomer, the buyer claims, Misha lekochti. He says, no, after the sale took place, that's when the birth happened. See, it's very new, it's very fresh. It must have been after the deal was done, so I should get both the mother and the child. So in this situation, yachloku, they would divide the value of the calf or the child. Now, to be clear, in the Gemara, they say this is not the halacha. Yachloku is the opinion of Sumchus, who says, Mamon mutal b'safek holkin. When there's a doubt and no one knows, no one can prove it, you should split it. But the other sages argue, they say, Hamotzi mechavero lavaraya, who's trying to extract additional money is the one who has to bring proof to get anything out of his fellow. We discussed this concept in Bava Kama as well, and that is the halacha. Now the Mishnah brings a related case. Chayulo shnei avodim. He has two servants, echad godol, echad katan. One of them is big and muscular and more valuable, and one of them is smaller. And he sold someone an eved. V'chen shtei sadot, or he has two fields, echad godol, echad katana. One's bigger, one's smaller. And again, he sold one field. And now the buyer and the seller are disagreeing. Obviously, the buyer says, you sold me the big one. You sold me the more valuable one. And the seller is saying, no, I sold you the smaller one. Now the Mishnah explains the outcome in halacha actually depends on the strength of their claim. So it explains, halokeach omer, the buyer says, gadol lakachti, I definitely bought the big one. V'hola omer, and the seller says, eni yodei, says, to be honest, I'm not so sure. I know I sold you one field. I have a big and a small, I'm really not sure. Zocha begodol. So the buyer has the right to get the larger field. And this is due to a concept we brought up at the end of Mishnah Bet in this parak, just yesterday's learning, that if somebody would have had to make a shavua, but he's eino yadea, he's not so sure. If you're not sure, you can't make a shavua. And because he can't make the shavua, he would have to pay. And in this case, he'd have to give up the bigger field since he's simply not sure. Now the Mishnah notes another possibility. Hamocher omer katan macharti. The seller says, I'm sure I sold you the small field. V'hala omer, and the buyer says, Eni yadei, says, to be honest, I'm not so sure. I know about one field from you. Ein lo ela katan. He has to take the small one. And here the seller has no obligation or requirement to make a shvua because there's no definite claim coming from the buyer. Zeomer gadol, the buyer says, I definitely bought the larger field. Zeomer katan, and the other one says, no, I definitely sold you the small one. Yeshava hamocher shekatan machar, the seller should make an oath that he sold the smaller one, and then the buyer would get the smaller one. Zeomer eni yadea, finally a case where the buyer says, I'm really not sure. Zeomer eni yadea, and the seller says, I'm not sure either. Yachloku, they would divide the difference. So in this case, the buyer would get the small field, and half of the difference in value between the small field and the large field. Though again, this is the opinion of Sumchus, Mamre Mutar B'Safek Hokin, but the halacha lemaisa is Hamotzi Mechavero Alav Haraya. If you're trying to get more money from someone, you better bring proof. Yashar Koach, if you're living in Chutz La'aretz, don't forget your Erev Tavshilin for the 3-day of Yom Tov. If you're in Eretz Yisrael already, I hope to join you soon. Tisku the mitzvot.